In January 2022, the Tata Group paid $2.2 billion to buy Air India from the Indian government. It was called the turnaround of the decade. They ordered 470 new aircraft, the largest aviation order in Indian history. They redesigned the livery, rebuilt the cabins, merged 4 airlines into one, and brought in a world-class CEO from Singapore Airlines to architect the whole transformation. Total committed investment, over $25 billion. The analysts called it generational. The headlines called it the moment Indian aviation finally grew up. By May 2026, Air India had just posted the largest operating loss in its 94-year history. Not its largest loss under Tata, its largest loss in nearly a century of existence. The question is not what went wrong. Every airline has bad years. The question is why $25 billion wasn't enough to stop it. To understand what happened, you have to understand what Tata actually bought in 2022. And it was not a healthy airline in temporary distress. Air India had lost money for 17 consecutive years under government ownership. By the time the sale was finalized, the airline was carrying 61,000 crore rupees in accumulated government debt. The fleet was aging. The workforce hadn't been managed competitively in decades, and the government was writing a check of approximately 20 crore rupees per day just to keep the airline operational. Tata paid 18,000 crore rupees for it, roughly $2.2 billion, and then they made a bet that the entire industry was watching. In June 2023, Air India placed an order for 470 aircraft, 250 from Airbus, 220 from Boeing. At list prices, that order approached $80 billion. They completed the merger with Vistara, absorbed Air Asia India, integrated Air India Express, and rebuilt the brand identity from scratch. New routes to 87 destinations across 29 countries. Campbell Wilson, former CEO of Scoot, Singapore Airlines budget arm, was brought in to run the whole thing. And here is the part that nobody talks about. Tata didn't just buy an airline, they bought a promise. The promise that India could finally have a world-class flag carrier, a country of 1.4 billion people, the fastest-growing aviation market on the planet, deserved something more than a government embarrassment. That was the strategic thesis. For the first 18 months, the numbers supported it. FY24 losses narrowed from 15,532 crore rupees to 10,122 crore rupees, a 35% improvement in a single year. Revenue grew 23%. New aircraft were arriving. New routes were opening. The story looked like it might actually be working. And the strategic logic underneath was sound, because Tata wasn't just buying profitability, they were buying assets that don't show up cleanly in a quarterly report. Landing slots at Heathrow, JFK, Frankfurt. Bilateral air rights the Indian government had spent 70 years accumulating. Those slots alone are worth billions on the open market. You cannot order them. You cannot replicate them. You either inherit them or you don't. By 2024, it looked like the most expensive airline bet in Indian history might actually pay off. And here is where it gets strange, because underneath the new livery and the 470 aircraft order, there were problems that money could not reach. The first one almost nobody covered. When the Indian government sold Air India in 2022, it retained the maintenance, repair, and overhaul infrastructure, the actual engineering department. Tata inherited the planes and the routes and the brand. They did not inherit the mechanics. The result was a pattern of AOG situations, aircraft on ground, grounded for maintenance issues that a properly integrated engineering department would have caught weeks earlier. Every AOG aircraft is a cancelled flight. A cancelled flight is a stranded passenger. A stranded passenger in India in 2024 had somewhere else to go. Indigo, whose on-time performance ran 10 to 15 percentage points above Air India's on most domestic routes. You cannot buy a maintenance culture. You cannot acquire 40 years of institutional knowledge in a restructuring deal. That gap had to be built from scratch. The second problem was structural in a different way. Tata had merged 4 separate airlines: Air India, Vistara, Air India Express, Air Asia India, each carrying its own pay structures, seniority systems, union agreements, and safety cultures. Air India's legacy workforce, tens of thousands of employees who had spent careers inside a government entity, operated under rules and expectations that don't translate into a competitive airline environment. Campbell Wilson described it internally as building a plane while flying it. The schedule was not designed around what the airline could sustain comfortably. It was designed around what the market required, and the workforce was asked to follow. Indigo, meanwhile, was not standing still. It held 64.2% of the Indian domestic market. It had 900 aircraft on order. It was beginning to explore international business class routes, going after the exact positioning Air India needed. On the routes that mattered most, Air India was trying to out-premium an airline that had been building scale for 20 years. Tata could order 470 planes. They couldn't order 70 years of maintenance culture. Then came FY26, and three external shocks arrived in the same financial year, on top of everything else. The first was Pakistan. Following escalating India-Pakistan border tensions in early 2026, Pakistan closed its airspace to Indian carriers. Air India's international routes to Europe, North America, and the Middle East had all transited Pakistani airspace. Overnight, those flights were rerouted, adding 2 to 3 hours to each sector. Extra fuel burn, extra crew hours, extra aircraft cycles. On 145 weekly international flights every single day. The additional cost in fiscal year 26 alone, 5,000 crore rupees. The second shock came on June 12, 2024. Air India Flight 171 departed Ahmedabad and crashed less than 2 minutes after takeoff, killing 241 people. It was the worst aviation accident in India in decades. The investigation is still ongoing. The direct costs, insurance exposure, grounded aircraft, regulatory scrutiny, ran to billions. The indirect costs were harder to quantify. Load factors dropped on key routes as passenger confidence fell. The combined financial impact, another 5,000 crore rupees. The third was fuel. Aviation turbine fuel prices climbed over 40% following the Middle East conflict. Air India, already carrying 40,000 to 50,000 crore rupees in debt and operating on thin margins, had limited fuel hedging in place. The daily cash burn reached 70 crore rupees. 70 crore rupees every single day. Any one of these three events would have been a serious problem for a healthy airline. All three arriving in the same financial year on an airline already carrying decades of structural debt was something different entirely. By the way, if you're following stories like this, subscribe. This channel covers the systems behind aviation that most coverage never gets into. Takes 2 seconds. But here is the part that actually matters, because the financial losses are explainable. The Pakistan airspace closure is explainable. The crash, the fuel. These are catastrophic, but they are events with causes and timelines. What is harder to explain is this. 4 years into the most expensive airline transformation in Indian history, nobody at Air India has fully answered what Air India is supposed to be. A premium global carrier that competes with Emirates and Qatar on the India to West corridor? Then the product has to be better than what Emirates offers at Dubai. The connecting hub experience has to be cleaner than what Qatar offers at Doha. Air India's Delhi hub, with its chronic delays and congestion issues, cannot match that. Not yet. A scaled full-service domestic carrier that competes with Indigo on price and frequency? Then the cost structure has to come down to a level that 4 merged airlines, legacy debt, and a premium brand positioning make almost impossible. Air India is caught between 2 viable strategies and executing neither one completely. Campbell Wilson resigned in April 2026, before his contract ended in 2027. He was the 3rd major airline chief globally to exit in a single month. His departure wasn't a failure of strategy. The trajectory was improving before the external shocks arrived, but the search for a successor is happening at precisely the moment the airline most needs stable leadership to answer that strategic question. Which brings us to the number that explains everything else. Total losses since the Tata acquisition have crossed 80,000 crore rupees. Monthly cash burn at current rates is 2,000 crore rupees. And Tata Group, alongside Singapore Airlines, which owns 25.1% of Air India and watched its own net profit fall 57% in FY26 largely because of this airline, is now in discussions for another 15,000 to 20,000 crore rupees capital infusion. Tata has the balance sheet depth to absorb this, barely. The strategic assets, the slots, the bilateral rights, the brand in the world's largest emerging aviation market, are still worth the bet if the airline survives long enough to use them. But at 70 crore rupees per day, the margin for error is gone. Tata bought everything you can buy to fix an airline: the planes, the routes, the brand, the CEO. What they discovered is that the thing that made Air India unfixable for 17 years under government ownership, the structural MRO gaps, the cultural debt, the identity it never fully had, is not something you can order from Boeing. The question for the next CEO is not whether Air India can be profitable, it is whether Air India can decide what it is for before the money runs out. If this story was worth your time, hit subscribe and drop it in the comments. Do you think Tata can pull this off? Or has Air India finally met a problem that money alone cannot solve?